before, but what was your reaction to watching the first episode?
You all laughed in the right places. No, I'm thrilled. Ladies and gentlemen, you've done me proud.
Was there anything in particular that was like exactly how you thought it would be, or very different than how you ever imagined?
It's kind of the same and different. I mean, there's moments that I recognize, and it's really thrilling to actually see them, physically rather than mentally. But at the same time, there are, slight changes, and this just adds to the reality of it.
And you have a cameo coming up as well, right?
Yes.
At least that's the rumor. Right? Can you talk about that at all at this point, or?
I'm not allowed to tell you who I am or what I'm doing, but it's in the 4th episode.
But see, and Ron, one thing that surprised me is when there's an adaptation like this, you're often braced for a lot of changes, and obviously there's the combat nurse scene in the beginning, but for the most part, this is like a very just a very loyal adaptation to especially the opening of the story in that first episode. Can you talk about how you approach that?
Well, that was the intention. I approached the project in the spirit of, this is a great story, it's a great book, people love it. My job is to adapt it and realize it and try to give people, a chance to see the story that they've read and loved for so long. It wasn't to reinvent it and to change it, it was just to realize it. So I just, myself and the other writers, we always sort of start with the book, and when we have to make changes, we always try to get back to where the book was, and so I'm happy to hear you say that, because that was very important to us. We really wanted to honor the spirit of what this was, to make the characters who they were, and the story, and to just sort of have something that the fans could enjoy, and that anyone who wasn't a fan would become a fan by the time they finished.
And I like that it really took time to introduce Claire and her husband's relationship. It wasn't in a hurry to get to the time travel aspect. And so you talk about how important it was to establish that relationship in the beginning.
Well, it was important because, I'm not giving any spoilers away to this crowd, I'm sure. So much of Claire's story in the first season is driven by her desire to return to the 20th century, to go back to her life.
Right.
In order to understand that, to not just go, well, why doesn't this woman just stay with these great guys in Castle Lear? You had to sort of invest yourself in the relationship that she had with Frank. You had to sort of take your time, take a moment and say, okay, here's an important relationship. Here's a man that matters to her, someone that she loves, and that the audience would sort of be rooting for them in a way. And then suddenly she's yanked away, and then all through the first season, until she decides to stay, she's driven by that desire to go back. And unless you really took some time and understood that relationship, you would just go, well, shit, just stay in the 18th century.
And there's lots of voiceover too, which is pretty unusual for a TV show nowadays. Can you talk about the decision to sort of keep the protagonists and the authors really voiced as part of the show?
Well, the book was written first-person narrative, and so again, we wanted to sort of make the show as close to the book as we could. So it served two purposes. One was just a practical one. She doesn't have anybody to talk to. There's nobody who knows what her journey is. So you would have ended up with places where she just couldn't confide in anyone, what she was going through. So that voiceover allows you to sort of get in touch with her and basically to share a secret with the audience. The audience is in on her secret, and it provides a real intimacy with the key character. And the second was just a creative choice, because it isn't done very much anymore, and it's something that people generally shy away from.
Right.
It was a way to sort of set the show apart and say, okay, we're going to do something different that people don't normally do.
And I'm sure there's a few aspects of this, but what was sort of particularly challenging about pulling off this project compared to some of your previous projects?
Well, it's just a difficult production, in general. Unlike your normal television show, there's not a precinct, there's not an apartment or a hospital, that you're going to, or a battle star, or a starship, just to pick examples out here. Those places, those home bases for a TV show are standing sets. They provide a place to go back to that's comfortable and easy to keep shooting, and they save money. The nature of the show was that the story evolves and changes, and the characters travel and leave. Castle Big is the closest we're going to come to a home, and as everybody in this audience knows, we ain't going to be there very long. So as a result, it became a much more complicated production, and in addition to that, we were shooting on location in Scotland, which is a very challenging environment, and you have the elements to deal with over and over again. It was very hard on the crew and the cast to be out in all hours of the day and night in just terrible conditions. During the winter, the hours of daylight are very short, and we're shooting right now, and the hours of night are very, very short in the summertime, so day scenes and night scenes always become really difficult. It's a very complicated show, and it looks as beautiful as it does, and it's realized as well as it does because of the efforts of literally hundreds of people who can't be here to share this with you tonight. Our amazing Scottish and UK-based crew who just sweat bullets and make this show look as amazing.
Great cast, starting with Caitriona, a role that I think you remember you saying is particularly challenging to cast because you needed somebody who, was going to be spending a lot of time, you're basically watching them think because they can't reveal their secrets. So Caitriona, must be interesting for you because you're both having to play to the other characters, in the scene, but you also have to play to the audience to some extent, in terms of projecting what only they know that you're thinking at that time.
Yeah, I mean, in a lot of ways, it's quite a difficult role because, I mean, in some respects, it's very reactive. It's kind of just, everything's happening to Claire, and she doesn't have anyone to confide in, and she doesn't, there's no one that she turns to and is like, God, this is what happened to me, so it's all very internal. But in another way, it was great that, we shot chronologically, so as things were happening, it was kind of almost. That was my journey as well. I sort of landed in Scotland, hadn't a lot of time to prepare, and it was kind of, that was it, I was there. A lot of those times when I'm looking confused, I was. But no, yeah.
And as playing the character as a woman from the 40s who goes back in time to 18th century, does that change how you approach that compared if it was a character from modern day that went back to the same time period?
I feel like, all of my prep was kind of about the 1940s. Claire had just spent a long time working as a nurse in the Second World War, and that was sort of the prism with which I wanted her to view the world. How does someone come out of, being that close to life and death on a daily basis, then sort of try and transition back into normalcy, and that was Claire's big struggle. It was kind of trying to come back and do the whole normal marriage thing, So I don't know if a modern woman, how that would have changed things. I loved that time period. I loved the 40s aspect. So I just kind of, that was sort of where I went to sort of start building the character.
And since you've been cast, I mean, this is even before it's premiered, this show is such a huge phenomenon. I think someone said backstage there's like 200 different fan groups around the world. I mean, what's it been like for you, getting this role and then being here at Comic-Con and sort of, I mean, that has to be kind of overwhelming, right?
Yes. It's been incredible. It's been really overwhelming. I think I was very proud of my 200 and something Twitter followers that I had pre-Outlander casting, and within 3 or 4 days it was in the thousands. I'm still very far behind Sam, but there's a way to go yet.
Quite a way.
But no, it's been incredible. I mean, these are Diana's fans first and foremost, and Ron's, and to have them just transfer their love and their enthusiasm to us and give us so much support has been just so incredible, and we're really grateful. So thank you.
And speaking of Sam, this role has been such this powerful romantic fantasy figure that so many readers have thought about over the years. To step into that try and embody that fantasy on screen, that has to be pretty kind of intimidating to some extent, maybe, I don't know.
I don't know, I spend a lot of time in the skirt. I spent a lot of time watching it now. I spent a lot of time being beaten up. Jamie suddenly goes through his torture and all sorts of things with Jack as well. So yeah, it's a pretty intense part, and there is a lot of action to it. There's a lot of horse riding and fighting. But at the centre of it is a great relationship to play, and obviously this wealth of material as well that Diana's written. So as an actor, it's a real gift.
And what's striking, especially reading the book, is that he's such a nice guy. I mean, he goes through all these hardships. He lives such a brutal life, but he's very amiable. It's like, oh, my back was whipped, no big deal. He's so capable and likable at the same time as being this sort of tough warrior.
Yeah, I think he's had nothing. Well, since the episode with Jack and his sister, he's sort of running away and sort of slightly on his own now, actually. So he's only got himself to look out for. And returning to Scotland, which is where he's at when we first meet him. He's just come back. Is sort of the beginning of him coming back to having responsibility, and then he gets married to this alien creature. I mean, alien is a beautiful thing, but and he has to learn to care for her, and then for family, for the house, for the estate, and yeah, it's a great journey to go on.
And it's such an intensely physical role too. What's been the sort of toughest physical thing to shoot so far?
Wow. Yeah, there's been a lot of fighting, which is great. I mean, to be honest, Caitriona spent the first 4 weeks in a shift in the dark of the night and walking around, and so I can never complain because she never did.
And someone backstage. And someone backstage suggested I ask you, Sam, what is it that Jamie calls Claire again?
No.
Sassanette. It's the title of the first episode.
He calls it the title of the first episode.
It's a Klingon word, actually.
If we have enough time, we're going to try and take some questions from the audience. And the way we're going to do that is via Twitter. If you want to tweet a question and just hashtag Outlander Premiere. And if I actually see it and it's an okay question, then I will try and get it out here. All right, so
Okay.
Tobias, you played 2 roles, which is pretty cool for a show. I have to imagine that playing blackjack is more fun.
Yes, probably. That's probably true. But I think what's been interesting about doing the show is I think there's a lot more of Frank in the TV show than maybe there is in the book, and so yeah, I think he's a grower, Frank. Sorry, Frank. He's so charming.
Whereas Blackjack, in your mind, is he entirely a villain? Does he have any redeeming qualities? Or
He's a good singer.
I mean, of course, approaching the part, I have to think about what's behind it. So it's not just a sort of series of very unpleasant behaviour. So yes, I don't know. I mean, it's a tricky thing to sort of talk about, really, because it's the job of rendering something which obviously is very close to everyone's heart and is very that's all I have to say about that. I'm incredibly jet lagged. My head just fell off, I think.
introduced your character, what can you say at this stage is really particularly unique about this role?
Well, I think the best way to describe Dougal is that he is a complicated man. So, he has personal feelings towards Claire, unfortunately not reciprocated in the way that he would like.
Yep.
But he has his duty towards the clan and his relationship with his brother, which is quite a political relationship, really. But I think his overarching responsibility, his personal loyalty, is to his country, and he is passionate about restoring the throne to the Stuart king, and that's his goal. And everything else, if it gets in the way, then he'll push that aside. But he's a great character to play. I've had a wonderful time, and I mean, on the subject of character, I just have to point out, by the way, that Sam's very modest, but he is JB. He is a thoroughly decent, kind, and lovely man, and I really sincerely mean that. He is exactly what you see. He's a good guy. I just wanted to say that. And so is everyone else.
And Lotte, your character, and she has a lot going on. I mean, her whole story could be its own fantasy, romantic book in itself, really.
Yeah, I guess not so much tonight, just yet. As with Galis, there's always a surprise waiting for you, and tonight she just didn't show up. But yeah, it's been really great to have had the opportunity to start playing this part, and she's also fighting for a cause very passionately, like Dougal, and I guess that's what connects them at some point. But she's not necessarily so open about it, so there's a whole lot of layers that you have to sort of go through to get there, and there's a whole lot of game playing and charm, and she's wicked, which I really loved. I love playing the part, so.
Let's see, someone just tweeted, actually, we know Kat had to do a chemistry test with Sam, but did Tobias have to test with Sam as well?
Those tapes have been sealed.
That's why they hired
There's a lot of
Sam.
chemistry there.
Ron, how closely will the story follow the book and the books? It's your plan, hopefully, one book per season. I mean, with The Walking Dead, Game of Thrones, you have changes made, you have characters killed off that aren't killed. I mean, so how closely do you plan to follow, you think?
Well, the plan is to be as faithful to the books as we can. I mean, that's the intention that we started with. That's the intention that we'll continue. The show has its own life. The show has its own, story going forward. So you do make changes that then you're obligated to follow as those changes have reverberations down the line. But I think our intention is always to be true to the path that Diana's laid out for us. And when we make variation, then we try to bend it back, one way or another, even if we can't bend it back right away. Eventually we'll try to bend it back in some other format, but yeah, that's the idea.
Right. And did you use, any real castles in terms of the production, or was it all sort of built in soundstage?
Castle Leach is Castle Doune in Scotland. Castle Doune is where they shot Marty Python and the Holy Grail. There today, you can actually get coconuts in the gift shop. And there are people shouting lines from Holy Grail.
That's
And I
awesome.
trust that a year from now, they will be shouting lines from Outlander.
Another interesting choice you made is you chose not to subtitle the Gaelic. Can you sort of talk about how you did that?
Well, that sort of goes to the point of view of the show again, because it was it's Claire's point of view, and I felt that Claire doesn't understand the Gaelic the Gallic language, so neither should the audience. So as you can see, we didn't subtitle any of it, but you're able to basically follow what's going on. You know, it's kind of easy actually to sort of get the gist of the scenes, and we continue to do that all the way through the show because she doesn't speak the language, neither should the audience, so we just don't subtitle it, and it's a real language, it's a living language. We have a full-time gentleman who teaches. Classroom, and he hits them with rulers when they don't. And he sort of checks on our editing to make sure when we edit it that we don't mistakenly like transpose lines or make it unintelligible, because it is a real language and people really do speak it in Scotland, and we wanted it to sort of be as faithful as we could.
And Diana, what was like, and without spoiling it for anyone who doesn't know, but just sort of hint to it, what's the one scene from either this book or your books in general that you're sort of most looking forward to? I got a feeling everyone's thinking of one that I don't know about yet.
Well, it's the same one as it was last time.
That's what we want to see.
One where Jamie gets a dog. A little puppy comes to Leo and he gets it.
Okay, let's run down. If you could time travel to any time, when would you time travel to?
I would go to Paris about 1895.
About specific.
You were that like ready. It's very specific.
Very Moulin Rouge.
I would go back to London in 1600.
Ooh.
That's the period that I would like to go back to.
Oh, please don't talk.
I think I'd go back about 5 minutes and try and do the answer.
Oh no.
How can I follow that? I'd like to go forward in time.
Ooh. To where?
To the bar.
I wouldn't be insulted people at all. I would probably do New York in the 20s.
There are a certain number of people who are under the impression that I actually do travel in time. And that in fact I have actually witnessed all this and I'm merely writing it down. If you'd like to believe that, go right ahead.
Okay.
I would go back to the day that Disneyland first opened.
At least it was really cool, right?
Yeah, and it was very hot.
Yeah, it was hot.
Someone just tweeted, Sam, what is the one 18th century characteristic Jamie